Sam here with jbugs.com. We're back to work on our 1971 Eurolook Super Beetle project, and we're going to continue this assembly at the front of the car. The original fenders aren't rusted through, but the front left has seen an obstacle or two in its time, and there's a good amount of surface rust on the bottom side. The passenger fender isn't bad, but we recommend replacing the fenders in pairs so the shapes and lines of the fenders match. Getting started, we chalk the back tires of the car, jack the front end up, set it on jack stands, and we pull off the front wheels. We'll also note beforehand, take pictures of the positions of all wires or other parts you aren't completely familiar with to make assembly easier in the future. Save all the hardware you've removed, and whenever possible, attach the hardware back to whichever part it belongs to. The turn signal assembly is removed from the front fender. Removing the chrome and lens isn't required, but removing the two nuts on the bottom side is. The assembly base is pulled off the fender. The wires are disconnected and the seal and wires are pushed down through the fender. Next, the headlight ring retaining screw is unthreaded and the headlight trim ring is removed so that we can access the 3 screws that hold the assembly to the fender. Once those screws are removed, the headlight assembly is pulled and the headlight plug is disconnected from the back of the bulb. If you're going to be replacing all the wiring, this step isn't necessary. But if you plan on reusing the original wiring and the headlight plug, spend a minute to remove the wiring terminals from the plastic socket. Removing the terminals is simple and only requires a small flat blade screwdriver. Push it into the socket of the wiring terminal at the small notch to release it, and pull the wire and terminal out the back. Once all 3 wires are removed, the wires and the grommet are pushed through the back of the headlight bucket. Next, the left and right bumper bracket bolts are removed, and the front bumper is pulled off the car. Now we can get to removing the fender itself. Spraying the bolts with a penetrating oil a day before is highly recommended, as it will help to loosen the rust and debris. As we remove our bolts, we find that some of the body nuts have fallen out and have been replaced with a washer and standard nut. Once all but one of the bolts has been removed, the bolt from the fender to the running board is removed, the last bolt is unthreaded, and the fender is removed along with the fender beading. With the fender out of the way, we can see that most of the body nuts are in place, but one has been twisted and 2 are missing completely. They will all be replaced or repaired during bodywork, but first we'll test fit our new replacement fender, so we bolt it up to the body and the running board. We always recommend test fitting any replacement parts before painting. Our fender lines up extremely well, which means the damage to the front of the car was minimal. We continue the mock-up by test fitting the headlight assembly, and once it's installed, we try to install the headlight ring. We can see here that the headlight sits too low in the aftermarket fender. This isn't a big deal as there are multiple mounting holes in the assembly, and after some careful repositioning of the assembly, it's reinstalled and we can install the headlight ring. The process is repeated on the opposite fender, and while test fitting the headlight assembly, we can note that with the assembly high enough in the fender to actually fit the trim ring, the lower screw can't be installed. So, we cut a small bracket from a piece of sheet metal and screw it to the lower mounting point on the fender with a self-tapping screw. Then we mount the bucket to the new bracket with another screw. It's a simple modification, and tricks like this are often necessary when using aftermarket parts. The alternative would be hours of bodywork on an old, dented, and rusted fender, so a few minutes of test fitting and some minor tweaks and modifications are well worth it. We won't be using the stock turn signals on our car, but if you'll be reusing yours, make sure to test fit them as well. Drilling into a freshly painted fender to install a turn signal that doesn't quite line up isn't fun. So test fit everything before painting. The front bumper is reinstalled, noting that the brackets are only loosely installed on the bumper. And once both brackets are bolted in place to the body, the bumper hardware itself is tightened up. Finally, the wheels are reinstalled and the car is lowered down to the ground so the body lines can be checked. And then we'll pull it all apart again and get the fenders over to the body shop. Thanks for watching. Make sure to click the like button below and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. And as always, when you need parts or accessories for your vintage Volkswagen, head over to jbugs.com.